You are addressing the High Council. It is a matter of utmost urgency that our defense force learns what happened as soon as possible. Yes, of course, the being on the view screen replied, its voice trembling. Whether the quiver came from the weight of speaking before such high-ranking officials or from the recent events it was about to recount was hard to tell. The chamber of the High Council was not an opulent one. It was, in fact, rather small, hardly befitting the sweeping authority of those who gathered within it. Yet its use had endured through centuries of tradition. Now, 12 beings representing 5 different species sat crowded around one end of a long table, craning to see the antique two-dimensional view screen that flickered before them. One of the 12, the same who had spoken earlier, leaned forward. Please confirm. Your outpost is a scientific facility, population approximately 1,000. That's correct, replied the base commander on the screen. You reported no casualties? None. A pause hung heavy in the air. That has never happened before. How did you manage it? The commander hesitated. It wasn't us. We asked the humans for help. Humans? The speaker repeated, tasting the unfamiliar word. The being on the screen made a small, embarrassed gesture. I mean, species ZD9. A ripple of murmurs spread among the council. Each member glanced down at the small handheld screens before them, quickly pulling up data. Species ZZ9, an uncontacted pre-warp civilization, had not yet achieved interstellar travel. Their only off-world endeavor had been a brief and primitive visit to the natural satellite of their homeworld, with no follow-up missions. The old table creaked as the speaker leaned closer. Are you telling us that species ZZ9 successfully defended your sector against a war band? The commander shook his head. No, they aren't capable of that. And as of now, they remain uncontacted. They know nothing of what happened. We enlisted only a few specific individuals for help. 4, to be exact. You're not making sense, another council member interjected. We were about to perish, or worse, to be taken as slaves, the commander explained. Desperation drove us to exploit an extraordinary trait of species Z9, one we had observed and which their culture seems to celebrate to a ridiculous degree. The speaker interrupted sharply. But you had been ordered to evacuate. Why did you not leave? The being on the screen shifted uneasily, showing a series of subtle emotional changes before settling on confusion. We had already sent an emergency aid request when we first detected the incoming fleet. We had no means to evacuate. A stir ran through the council. The 12 hastily requested access to that aid request on their personal devices. For a long, tense moment, only silence filled the chamber as they discovered that the plea for help had been denied. Officials elsewhere had deemed the risk too great, unwilling to endanger what few military ships remained. Shall I continue? The commander asked. That question, borderline insubordinate, snapped the 12 out of their collective shock. The speaker gave a curt nod. Yes, explain this special trait of species ZZ9. They say, the commander began slowly, that to a human, everything is a weapon. A few eyebrows rose among the council. This, he continued, is what we exploited. We sent them to the orbital debris field around Narration, the gas giant, 3rd planet in our system. How exactly did you go about that? We gave them... The commander was cut off again. The speaker raised a hand apologetically. Please, start from the beginning. How did you select these 4 humans? And how did you establish initial communication? The being on the screen glanced aside, visibly uncomfortable. There was no time. The crew of the system hopper we dispatched to Earth simply searched for individuals in remote areas. They approached them, explained our situation briefly, and asked for their help. I take full responsibility for this breach of first contact protocol. And you actually found such individuals? We did. The first few either panicked or refused. sometimes both. Those were sedated and safely returned to their planet. But eventually, the crew encountered a ground vehicle carrying 4 humans who agreed to help. They were brought aboard. The council remained silent. Finally, one of the 12 asked, "They didn't object to the enormity of this task or to being taken from their home world?" The crew reported that the 4 were only mildly disturbed by the situation, the commander said. I later learned that all 4 had military backgrounds. They were trained to handle unexpected developments. They'd been given a brief summary of our circumstances before departure, so they understood what was at stake. Though, he hesitated. The crew did note that one of the 4 had to be sedated before takeoff, at the insistence of the other 3. They handled everything surprisingly well, the commander continued. One of them even seemed genuinely enthusiastic about space travel. "And then you brought them to the debris field?" the speaker asked. "No," the commander replied. "They were first brought to our base. There we provided them with everything our chief engineer thought might be of use. I'll send you a full list of the tools, devices, gadgets, and items they were given. But what they made the best use of were the engineering assistant head circlets." The speaker frowned. "Wait, those are biologically compatible?" A look of mild frustration crossed the commander's features. Before the commander could continue, one of the 12 interrupted loudly. "This is an extremely dangerous development. Those devices are species-specific and contain sensitive data on our technology. You cannot simply hand them to an underdeveloped primitive species, especially one capable of using them." The base commander fell silent for a moment, drawing a slow, deliberate breath. "For us, it was about survival," they said at last, "and about protecting the human system as well. If we fell, they might have been the next target. We used everything at our disposal to give both ourselves and them a fighting chance." "Honorable as your intentions may have been," the angry counselor began, "this will leave a considerable stain on your—" The speaker cut them off with a raised hand, signaling for silence. "Please, continue. Tell us what happened next." The commander nodded. Among the 4 humans, there was already a clear hierarchy. One acted as their leader. They took control of all communications and quickly formulated a plan based on the tactical information we provided about the enemy and the limited defensive assets we had. Their first request was for a ship, something capable of transporting them and the equipment they selected to the orbital debris field around Narration. "What sort of armaments were present there?" another council member asked. "What did the humans find to work with?" "None," the commander replied. "There were no weapons at all." "None?" "The debris field is the aftermath of a failed gas mining venture. For years, it served as a dumping ground for the remains of old interstellar projects from various civilian cooperatives, until regulations eventually banned such practices. The humans' leader told us they weren't looking for firearms. They even refused the meager weaponry we offered." "No weapons?" the speaker said, incredulous. "Then how did they plan to mount any defense at all?" The commander hesitated. "I can't say with certainty what they did or how they made it work, but I can tell you what we witnessed." They took a deep breath before continuing. Using the data accessed through the engineering circlets, they managed to revive an ancient long-range colony vessel, something that had been floating dead for centuries. In an astonishingly short amount of time, they restored its resource extraction systems and began dismantling other derelict ships throughout the debris field, salvaging whatever components they could. For a moment, the commander looked away from the camera, their voice tinged with disbelief. Throughout all their salvaging, they were broadcasting music, ancient melodies, transmitted over low-range subspace frequencies. I later learned it was a collection of battle compositions from their homeworld. "Please, do not digress," the speaker reminded. "Yes, of course." The commander composed themselves. They tore apart rift engines that were not only ancient but likely defective. They scavenged spent power plants, obsolete computer cores, and entire subsystems that should have been useless, And yet, they integrated them all into their restored colony ship, constructing something. The council had been listening intently. Finally, one of them burst out. "Something? What was it? What did they build?" "I honestly have no idea," the commander said. "Before they completed their external modifications, we lost subspace contact and visual feed. At first, I thought the warband had jammed communication since they were entering our system, but soon it became clear that wasn't the case. The interference dissipated, yet we still had no insight into what the humans were doing. We were teetering on the edge of panic as the warband arrived." The commander's voice grew quieter. "Hundreds of ships dropped through the rift. Nothing stood between them and us, and just as they began to advance, a broadcast came from Narren's orbit." "What kind of broadcast?" In rough, heavily accented words, the warband was told to surrender. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. "Our sensors detected active energy signatures from roughly 40 ships in Narren's orbit," the commander went on. "It seems the warband saw the same readings and mistook it for a local defense fleet. They immediately changed course toward Narren. But of course there was only one ship there. One." They paused. That fact became clear when the humans' ruse broke down, just as the enemy came within range of the gas giant. We could only watch, helpless, as it all began to unfold. The commander's voice grew softer as they continued. "The enemy began bombarding the larger wrecks in the debris field with heavy ordnance. Then two things happened at once." They paused briefly before going on. First, a massive atmospheric eruption took place on Narren, ejecting countless megatons of gas directly toward the warband's fleet. And second, we lost subspace communication again, completely blinded. Our engineers later determined the cause, a localized interference field that disrupted everything, even the navigation systems of rift engines. This blockage, as we later learned, was only part of the humans' defense plan. A few murmurs rippled through the chamber. "The second part," the commander said, "only became clear much later, when the light from the events near Narren finally reached us. The warband's battleships had been trapped. Their retreat was blocked, their communications muted, their sensors blinded, and they were lost in a dense cloud of volatile gas. And into that chaos, the 4 humans charged, aboard their modified colony ship." The commander's tone shifted, colored with awe. "I have never seen a vessel of that size move so gracefully. It was enormous, yet it maneuvered like a fighter craft. From what little we could detect, they were somehow using the gas itself as a transmission medium for a kind of concussive attack. One battleship after another was knocked out as the colony ship weaved through their ranks. A few of the 12 exchanged stunned looks, but just as we began to celebrate, the commander continued grimly. A handful of warships recovered from their confusion and opened fire. The commander fell silent. For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, they drew in a deep breath and said, "Perhaps I should explain why the mining operation on Narren failed." The council leaned forward. "Among the lighter gases in Narren's atmosphere are significant concentrations of volatile compounds brought up by enormous stationary hurricanes, compounds that can ignite under the right conditions." The commander's expression hardened. "We watched the entire fleet vanish in what I can only describe as a sun-sized fireball. When the flames subsided, the warband's surviving ships were barely holding together, their hulls half melted, their systems crippled." A whisper broke the silence. "And the humans?" "They survived," the commander said simply. "We received a transmission just as local subspace stabilized. Shortly afterward, a rift opened, and their ship vanished through it. Given what that colony vessel had become, I have no doubt they managed it." "So the humans," the speaker said tonelessly, "are still out there." "I suppose so," the commander replied. The speaker stared blankly for a moment before asking, almost to themselves, "How? How could 4 individuals stop an entire warband with a single ship and live?" Another counselor leaned forward. Did they truly suffer no casualties? Yes, the commander said. None, which is why we must submit another emergency aid request. What? Why? The commander waved their arms, exasperated. Because while we were able to take them in, we now have over 3,000 refugees. We cannot possibly house or feed them all. The room froze. Refugees? One of the 12 repeated faintly. Yes, the commander said. The war bands surrendered. That's why we won. The speaker tried to respond, but stopped halfway through a word. So when you said no casualties... Yes, the commander confirmed. I meant on both sides. I'm fairly certain the humans took great care to disable, not destroy. Their attacks were all non-lethal, but now we have thousands of former enemies begging to stay on the planet's surface. They claim to be terrified of returning to space. 2 of the 12 opened their mouths, but no sound came. Another simply sat frozen, eyes wide. At last, the speaker broke the silence. Can you establish contact with those humans? I believe so. The commander reached off screen, then held up a sheet of paper. In their last transmission, they told us to call upon them again if we or anyone we knew ever came under attack. They gave us a sequence of numbers. Apparently, it's an identifier used in some communication system on their planet. Did they say anything else? Well, the commander hesitated, then nodded. They thanked us for the supplies we provided, and their leader said something about having a great fondness for a plan that comes to fruition. Though I can't say I'm entirely confident in my translation. The 12 exchanged uncertain glances. Then the speaker straightened in their seat. That will be all for now. We need time to review this new information. Expect further questions soon. In the meantime, compile a complete report on the incident and begin analyzing this human communication system. Your request for supplies is granted. It will be processed immediately. The commander nodded in acknowledgement. The view screen flickered off. For a long while, the historic chamber remained silent. 12 beings from 5 species staring at the empty screen, each silently considering the same impossible thought. 4 humans, 1 ship, no casualties, and a war band that surrendered.